Imagine you're all in a theater. And right here, downstage center, there's a man and a woman sitting at a counter facing you. Suddenly, an angry mob starts to come up behind these people, sneering and cursing. They close in on these people and start to really torment them, blowing cigarette smoke right in their face, screaming at them, pouring drinks over their heads. The man and the woman do not react. They just sit there calmly. This only seems to make the mob angrier. And they slap these people, burn them with their cigarettes, and throw them onto the ground and start to kick them. Enter the police. What a relief. Finally, the police push their way through the angry mob and arrest the man and woman on the floor and drag them off to jail. And scene. You might ask, what kind of show is this? That was awful. There's no catharsis. There's no consoling message at the end. We're not going to get a latte afterwards and talk about it. Right? We feel unsettled. Right? There's just cruelty followed by a twist ending of the worst kind. The police arrested the wrong people. The fault is not in our stars, nor in ourselves. It's in our system. And of course, these were the sit-ins of the civil rights movement. Right? Along with many other similar actions, they resulted in a disenfranchised minority winning actual legal victories and rights in the face of outrageous oppression and against the odds. But why were these actions so powerful that these activists were able to win in tangible ways when they were totally outnumbered and outgunned in every way? Let me back up a minute. When I was 16, I started to act in the theater. And I was really excited. I loved the camaraderie of the risk we were taking, right? The excitement of the coming together for a common creative vision. And the emotional impact we could sometimes have when we did our job well. I was also stunned and amazed by the tragicomic and ridiculous results when we flopped. I got involved in activism for human rights and social justice, and I started to think about how could these two fields talk to each other and inform each other, performance and activism. On the theater side, sometimes we did pretty good shows, but our impact was limited to the ticket-buying audience, a small and self-selecting group, sometimes our parents, who mostly already agreed with us. And that's great, that's fine, but I was trying to think about how can we communicate a little more widely? On the activism side, well, we were very sincere and hardworking, but often our marches and demonstrations were frankly bad theater. They were cliched, kind of staid and boring, and easily ignored. In theatrical terms, we got bad reviews, the audiences were not impressed, we flopped. So for about 20 years now, I've been experimenting with applying theatrical values, timing, composition, character, costume, dynamics, suspense, surprise, to make activism more compelling and exciting and engaging, impactful. I've led tactical performance workshops all over the world, and even during a few uprisings. We've come to a world now of 24/7 edutainment and information overflow. So people are more accessible than ever, but it's harder to hold their attention on your issue unless you happen to own your own TV station. So again, back to the civil rights movement now. Why were these sit-ins so powerful that they overcame institutional racism, decades of apathy and indifference, and even outright hostility from the majority population and the state against opponents who held every card, legally and otherwise? The superior raw power of their opponents. You know, what many people do not realize is how intensely rehearsed and prepared these actions were. They thought theatrically. As they prepared to sit in at racially segregated lunch counters, these whites-only spaces, they rehearsed in secret with each other, taking turns pretending to be themselves and playing the racist mob so that they would be prepared for the abuses and the taunts and they wouldn't lose it and strike back. And this is an image from just such a rehearsal. They thought in terms of costume, wearing only their Sunday best. They thought in terms of casting and script. In fact, people were only allowed to participate in these actions if they signed a pledge to stick to the dramatic discipline of the script, not to shout back or strike back or run away. And most importantly, they thought in terms of dramatic conflict, protagonists and antagonists. They created a scene in which their opponents, who had all the legal power, all the weapons and the rights, were made out clearly to be the bad guys. And by the way, this is just a basic rule of stagecraft. If you show one person standing above somebody else and attacking them from above and behind, the vast majority of people are going to identify with the victim and not the cowardly bully. So as the civil rights movement provoked these spectacles of cruelty on the national and global stages, they garnered sympathy, support, and outright legal victories, and even triggered federal intervention. Don't forget, this is during the Cold War. And the US government does not want to have this sort of thing happening while they're being the leader of the free world. Right? It hurts the image. So this is the power of performance when harnessed with training and discipline and skill in struggles for social justice. Now, being right is not good enough. You need to grab people's attention by breaking the rules or defying expectations, and you have to win in a war of symbols and symbolic action and storytelling. It's vital that we avoid cliché at all costs. Cliché is the bane of any art form, and I'm arguing that protest is an art form. When you read a cliched or predictable book or poem, right, you might even put it down before you even finish it. Cliched plays tend to close down early in the run. Same thing for protest. Walking around in circles, holding signs, and chanting the same old chants isn't just bad theater. It's detrimental to your cause because it's bad theater. So look for newer and surprising forms. Surprise is essential. When you can surprise someone, you earn a moment with something that's playful or creative. You earn a moment to make your point. It's an idea from the theater, earning this moment, right? And I'm making a distinction here between surprise and shock. Right? It's kind of hard to shock anybody anymore, right? But you can still occasionally surprise them with just the right playful action. And they might even thank you for it, even if they disagree with you. Because when you can take somebody from huh to aha in just a split second, it can be kind of fun for both of you. Okay? Now, I do have to ask you all, talking about surprise, how would you feel if you were walking down the street and you're suddenly confronted by a large army of clowns marching towards you in perfect drill formation? I can tell you I was one of those clowns marching, and I was surprised from it on the inside. I totally was blown away. No, I started something called the Clown Army with John Jordan, Jennifer Verson, Zoe Young, and others. And the idea was to open up creativity of different kinds of protests for artists and activists, and to open up restricted public space to new kinds of playful disobedience. And to interrupt the hegemonologue that was being put out in the popular media, this hegemonic monologue that claimed that protesters for social justice were sort of dangerous nihilists bent on destruction, which was going on a lot. So this video is from the G8 in Scotland. You can see the clowns have taken the street playing the hokey pokey, and the police really don't want them to be there, understandably. Now Trixie the clown is kissing the shields here. And again, we're trying to break down typical patterns of obedience or defiance. It's good to leave a lipstick mark, it's important. Now the police are not trained for this eventuality. They're trained for a lot of things, they're not trained for the clowns, right? And that's the idea. And you can see that, I mean, they have full armor on. This is a performance of, now this is over compliance or over deference from the clown. That boot is combat boot, right? It's flame proof, it's stomp proof. It is not clown proof. And the clown is proving that right now. By the way, don't try this in New York City. The police are a little tougher there. You do have to adjust clown army techniques to your local municipality. Okay? And again, this action, you continue to improvise and keep working at the police. I would want to point out it's politically more costly to club a clown, especially when the cameras are rolling, and that's part of the dynamic, as you can see. And I do appreciate this man's reaction. I really like that he's laughing. That means a lot to me. He's having a much better day than he thought he was going to. And I think that's valid. I think that's important. Very strong smile. He means it. He's feeling it. And that image did go all over. And even with a little bit of clown magic, we train the clowns in improvisation, creative, nonviolent civil disobedience, and of course, just different kinds of theatrical techniques. And we follow each other's lead. There's a little bit of clown magic happening here. And eventually the magic works, I guess. Or the police just decide, you know what, we have other things we could be doing today. We don't really need to do this. Much to the delight of this young man here. Yes. Now, in this action here, of course, they've worn down the police to play a game with them. And yes. And we're trying to wear away at the cliched patterns of interaction between the two sides, right? Okay. And this image from that confrontation, as you remember, was reproduced all over the world. And this is an example of what I refer to as the irresistible image. An image so compelling that even your opponents will reproduce it. Now, if that image happens to undermine the story they're telling the world, all the better, bonus, all right? Now, this image of the clown kissing the shield was reproduced in newspapers that strongly opposed our movement and claimed that we were a bunch of violent criminals, right? So the image actually undermined the context of the text of the articles themselves, even if only for a disruptive moment in the global imaginary. So they're saying we're dangerous people and awful. I was baton charged a couple times during this same protest, by the way, and I had to run away in my big shoes, which was awkward. So I don't want you to get the wrong idea that the magic always works, okay? But this is an example of political Aikido, okay? Taking your opponent's superior force and momentum and using it against them. And by the way, we garnered a lot of attention with these antics and then got actual interviews, and we were able to make our serious points about the G8's policies. As Colonel of Truth of the Clown Army, thank you very much, I was able to provide the kernel of truth sometimes about what we were doing. Of course, the clowns are not the only ones engaging in seriously silly activism. There's thousands of examples of using humor, satire, or irony in protest, including, not to offend anyone, the Billionaires for Bush with their slogan of small government, big wars. Right? And the Church of Stop Shopping, Survivaballs, and even this gentleman on the right protesting the Westboro Baptist Church rather eloquently. Right. Okay. And of course, our leaders understand the importance of costumes and symbolism as well. Now, tactical performance is not always funny. Sometimes the tragic tone is exactly what's called for, and anything else would be tone deaf and tasteless, right? So when the Bush administration forbade the photographing of the flag-covered coffins coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, they showed that they understood the power of that image, understandably. Some people fought that ruling legally on constitutional grounds. Artists Mike Deceive, Jenna Hunt, and others decided to respond artistically and creatively. At that time, the US casualty count had just passed 1,000. So they made 1,000 coffins and covered them with flags, and with the help of veterans groups that they worked with, they marched these coffins through the streets of New York and DC. In essence, they performed the censored image in a way that was compelling and which made the censorship obsolete. And these images went all around the world. Now, in Aikido, you can disarm a much stronger opponent by artfully manipulating important joints and pressure points on the body. As creatively engaged citizens, we can find metaphorical pressure points on the body politic, where with a symbolically powerful creative intervention, we can have a surprisingly high impact on public dialogue without any big support or funding. This was not supported by the NEA, okay? Along similar lines, there's the street theater of the Iraq veterans against the war. They performed street patrols in major American cities to try to bring the reality of the war back home. Okay. Here they are. So there's an element of surprise to these actions, as you can see. They're kind of crashing the party of everyday American urban life with this military street theater. They're not using guns, right? They don't want to give people heart attacks for real. But as you can see, they're moving through the city and they're grabbing people, throwing them to the ground, arresting them, putting plastic. This is exactly what they were doing in Baghdad not long before. Now, these are not just random passersby. These are their friends. Please, please. These are their friends who agreed to be part of it, plants in the audience, as we say in the theater, who agree with them and wanted to help them out. But still, this is a gripping kind of reminder for those of us who have maybe been a little bit too insulated from the reality of the veterans and the people that they're patrolling in other countries of what both sides are going through here. And they're protected a bit from some criticism by their actual legitimacy as actual veterans who did serve their country. Yeah. So in conclusion, tactical performance is only one aspect of activism, but it is a crucial element. And when you're doing this kind of work, you're not just advocating for your one issue, you're modeling a different kind of citizenship, one that's proactive and engaged and creative and playful. And it's also, by the way, a lot of fun and very liberating. I can testify, you should try it. So many of us have gotten very cynical about democracy and the public sphere, but you can engage with it creatively and directly through performance. And you don't need a grant. So consider expressing yourself in this way, and you're expressing your concerns. You don't have to be a professional full-time actor or director. Just think about the example of the civil rights movement, right? Think in terms of audience and message. Create a disarming moment where your opponents walk into a scene of your creation, one in which they are obviously the bad guys on the global stage. Be thoughtful, be creative, work hard, and make it look easy, just like on our best days, we do in the theater. Thank you.